Well, it's been 2 whole months since we finished our Kegerator cabinet. It's time to do a little review. What's going on, adventurers? My name's Travis and welcome back to another project. In today's video, I'm going to take you through a walkthrough of our Kegerator cabinet we built over the winter, as well as give you a bit of a review of some of the products we use and just some tips and tricks I learned along the way with this build. It's been about 2 months since we finished this build. We've been using it quite a bit, putting the Kegerator through its paces. We've had a few people over. Everybody's really impressed with the build quality of this project. If you're new to this channel, like I said, my name's Travis, and we're all about projects that add adventure to your life. If you haven't been following along with this build, my wife and I over the winter built this awesome Kegerator cabinet / bar to house a 2-tap Danby mini fridge Kegerator, as well as a wine fridge. We finished the cabinet off with a distressed wood finish, has a really cool rustic look. Everybody that's come over has commented on how much they like our cabinet. It acts as a really neat centerpiece to our dining room, and it's just something really unique that not a lot of people have. So let's jump into this review. So I'll give you a quick rundown of our Kegerator cabinet before we get into it. Over there on the far side, we've just got a cabinet for some extra storage. There's 2 shelves in there. Right here we have a wine fridge. Right now it's just mostly stocked with canned beer. Underneath here, we built in a little extra storage, a place that we can have a power bar, route everything in, just clean all the wires up and everything. And over here, obviously, this is where our Kegerator is housed, and then our tap setup at the top. Starting off at the top, this is our 2-tap setup from KegCo. We purchased their conversion kit. It comes with everything you need, all the lines, all the fittings, a CO2 tank regulator, as well as this tap setup. The tower has been working really nice. This entire tower is fully insulated, so you don't get any sweating or anything like that from the cold beer lines inside. The taps work really smooth. We only have one hooked up at the moment, but hopefully we'll be adding the second one here shortly. The only issue I've run into with the tap is if you don't use it for about a week, it gets a little stuck. I think it's just the sugars from the beer kind of gumming up that tap. You kind of have to pull on it a little bit, break it loose. I think that's probably just something that you'd be dealing with any tap setup that you don't pour anything from for a whole week, so it's not a big deal. The drip tray came with double sticky back tape so that you can stick it down and keep it in place. I thought about drilling a couple holes and just mounting it right to the tabletop, but actually it seems to work a little bit better if you just keep it loose. That way you can just pick it up, carry it over, wash it out in the sink, clean it up if it gets a little dirty, and then you can just set it back down. It's pretty heavy, so it doesn't move around very easy at all. Our tabletop has been holding up really well. We went with 2x6 boards that are all glued together. They've stayed glued really nicely. They haven't been separating or anything like that. The finish is holding up nice. We went with stain, and then we sanded through so you could see the wood grain, and then finished it off with a polyurethane high gloss finish. I was initially a little worried with the polyurethane finish that it wouldn't hold up very well over time. It was a little bit on the softer side. Now I think that's just because it was out in the garage. We let it set for a couple days, but it was fairly cool out there, so I don't think it was fully curing. Once we got it inside, it's hardened up really nice. It's standing up to the wear and tear. It hasn't been peeling or anything like that. Our storage cabinet on this side was built mostly to give some symmetry to the entire cabinet. The nice part with this is it's the same size as our Kegerator side, so if we ever want to add a second mini fridge and another tap setup, we could have 4 taps. I don't know if we'll end up doing that, but it gives us the option. Opening this up, we don't really have a lot in here. I find mostly with our beer glasses and everything, we just keep them in the kitchen. We've just got a couple of the extra parts and everything like that came with our Kegerator setup. It does give quite a bit of extra storage in your dining room, you know, if you don't have a curio cabinet or something like that, gives you the option to put some stuff in there. The shelves are made of 1/2-inch plywood, just on little shelving hangers here. They're fairly sturdy, but if you're gonna put anything really heavy on it, you might wanna add a little extra bracing. With building everything in a rustic style, it was a little tricky to get all the catches and everything to line up correctly. The hinges we use are just gate hinges, so they're not super precise. So anytime we moved the cabinet or shuffled it around, we had to readjust where the catches were. Now that we've got it in its final place, we haven't been moving it around at all. Everything has been lined up really nice and has been working well over the past 2 months. We had this mini fridge sitting around the house. We didn't really have a place to put it, so we thought we'd build it into our home bar here. It gives a really cool modern style to the old distressed wood finish. I custom built this shelf for the wine fridge, really reinforced the floor to make sure that it could handle the weight if it was fully stocked. I made sure to leave about 2 inches on all sides of the wine fridge. This just allows air to circulate and make sure that it doesn't overheat. I built this lip for the wine fridge along here. That way, when you're opening the fridge, you don't have to worry about pulling on it too hard, having it fall right out of the cabinet. The power cord is routed down through a hole at the back of the cabinet into this little compartment here. So this compartment is just attached with these 4 little clasps, just the same kind that we used for the catches on the doors. Underneath here, we've just got a power bar. All our cords are routed down into this compartment. It just makes for a really nice clean look. These catches were a little tricky to line up and get to work right. I worked from the back of the cabinet and used a couple big C-clamps to hold the door in place, and then mounted the catches from the back. Overall, they work pretty well, and it goes on and off really easy. I decided not to go with any handles on this panel. It just makes for a nice clean look, makes it look like there's nothing behind there, and there's plenty of room to grab onto it and pull it off if you need. Finally, the centerpiece to this entire cabinet, our kegerator. So this kegerator was built out of a Danby 4.4 mini fridge. We converted it over, drilled a hole in the top for the beer lines to come out. We bought this used off our local buy and sell. Overall, it's in pretty good shape. There's a couple dings and scratches on it, but it's behind this cabinet door, so you don't see it. To do this conversion, we had to cut off all the shelves, the entire panel on the inside of the door. This makes room for the keg. Like I said, we only have the 1 keg in here at the moment, but there should be enough space for 2 kegs in here. Might have to shave down some of the foam to make it fit. With the kit from KegCo, it came with all the beer lines and all the fittings to put onto the corny kegs. In the very back of the fridge, there's a bit of a shelf there. We have our CO2 tank with our regulator housed back there, and then we just have our extra beer lines and gas lines for our second tap just sitting loose in here. There were a couple problems I ran into over the last month. The first being the light for the fridge. It has this little switch here that usually gets turned off when you close the door. The issue is we cut out all the door support pieces here, so there's nothing to push on it. So currently I just have it duct taped. That seems to be working. The light's just always off now. The biggest issue I ran into was after about 2 weeks of use, things were working really good. The beer was carbonated up really nice. Went to go pour a beer and there was nothing. Looked at my regulator and the pressure in my tank was completely empty. I thought I had taken the time when I was installing all the lines. I really tightened them down, used some soapy water on everything. It looked like everything was good. Since the pressure lasted 2 whole weeks, it must have just been a very slight leak. But nonetheless, it was still another trip into town and another $35 to get the tank filled again. After I got back from the second fill, I went over all the lines again, really tightened them up. The only thing I could think is once they got in the fridge, maybe they cooled off and allowed just a really slow leak. But as an extra precaution, what I've started doing is turning off the CO2 tank as well as the valve for the line that leads to the keg. Since this keg is fully carbonated already, there still should be the correct pressure in here. I haven't really been having any issues with any pressure leaking out of the keg. So I turn it off, then a week later if you want to use it, you can just turn that CO2 back on and you can pour a beer. If you wanted to pour a beer with the tank off, you could, because there is some residual pressure in the headspace in the keg here, but the issue is then you start depleting that, and then your beer could go flat over time. So if you just turn it on, pour your beer, and then keep it on for the night or whatever you're using it, and then turn it back off. This just prevents any chance of leaking out that pressure and then having that whole issue of having to go in, get more CO2. I've been running the regulator at about 11 to 12 PSI. I have about 5.5 feet of beer line. It's been working really nice. The beer's been pouring really easy with no foaming. I hinged the tabletop at the back of the cabinet with about a 6-foot piece of piano hinge. This just allows a little easier access to the top of the kegerator. One of the things I was most worried about was the distance the beer lines had to travel from the top of the kegerator into the tower. The issue you can run into with these remote tower setups like this is, since they're not attached to the actual kegerator itself, they're not getting that cold air up into the tower. The beer that's sitting in the lines actually starts to warm up, and the warmer a liquid is, the less CO2 it can actually hold. So that CO2 starts to come out, and then the first pour that you have is just all foam. I've seen a couple different ways that people have tried to reduce this. Some using copper tubes. By running your beer line through the copper tubes, the idea is that the copper stays cold in the fridge, and then that coldness travels up the tube. Another one is a tower cooler, so either using a computer fan or something like that to force air up a tube into your tower. The idea I came up with was trying to insulate that gap as best I could from the top of the kegerator to the bottom of the tabletop. There's about a 2.5-inch diameter hole that I drilled in the top of the kegerator, and so my thought was if I could insulate this area, some of the cold air would pass up through there and just keep those lines a little cooler. So I've built what I've been calling an insulation cake in one of our videos. So I used some pipe wrap and then made 2 rings and filled the inside of that with some spray foam that you would use to insulate doors and windows. So this created a nice insulated space, and really it's been working really nice. After the foam had started curing and setting, while it was still a little tacky, I set it into the Kegerator cabinet and closed the lid, and this just mated the 2 sides really nicely to each other. So actually this worked a lot better than I thought it would. It created a nice insulated space for that cold air to come out from the Kegerator, go up to the tower, keep those beer lines cold. I haven't been having any issues with foaming, and even better, the first beer you pour is nice and cold. I hope you've enjoyed our 2-month walkthrough of our Kegerator cabinet / home bar. Overall, over the last 2 months, this thing has functioned really nice. I really love the look of it. All our friends and family that come over are amazed we built this ourselves and think it's so cool just the way it functions. It's pretty funny to see the look on their face when you hand them a glass and they can walk over and pour their very own beer on tap right there in the dining room. So I hope I've given you some ideas, as well as shown you a couple of the issues I've run into. That way when you're building your very own cabinet, it works out really well for you. If you have any questions about this cabinet build, any of the finishing, functionality, parts we've used, please comment below. I know there's not a ton of information out there on these Kegerator cabinets. When I was building this, I had to really research each individual piece. So anything I can do to help make your build go easier, I'm happy to. If you haven't already liked and subscribed to our channel, we'd really appreciate the support with some of the cool projects that we have coming up. I'll post a link in the description to some of the parts we've used, maybe help make it a little easier for you to source them. Thanks for joining us, and I hope to see you back here again really soon for another adventure project.